Thank you all for joining us. My name is Nick. I'm one of the events hosts here at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. If you don't already do so, please follow us on our social media handles via Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. Today, we are so thrilled to have with us Syren Nagakyrie in conversation with Naomi Ortiz, talking about Syren's new book, The Disabled Hiker's Guide to Western Washington and Oregon. Syren Nagakyrie is the founder of Disabled Hikers, an entirely disabled-led nonprofit organization building disability community and justice in the outdoors. Syren writes trail guides, leads group hikes, and offers consultations throughout the Pacific Northwest and farther afield. As a freelance writer, Syren has been published in multiple anthologies, magazines, and blogs, and they were selected as a Rooted in Rights storyteller for 2019. The Disabled Hiker's Guide to Western Washington and Oregon is the first book of its kind to consider the diverse needs of disabled people in the outdoors. This groundbreaking guidebook includes 60 outdoor adventures, including drive-up experiences, verified wheelchair accessible trails, and foot trails suitable for disabled hikers. This guide removes one of the barriers to access, a lack of information, by utilizing a rating system and detailed trail information designed for the disability community. Each trail is personally assessed according to Nagakyrie's skilled and detailed review and established accessibility guidelines. Nagakyrie will be joined in conversation today by poet, writer, and visual artist Naomi Ortiz, whose intersectional work focuses on self-care for activists, disability justice, climate action, and relationship with place. They are the author of Sustaining Spirit, Self-Care for Social Justice, and the poetry prose collection Rituals for Climate Change, a Crip Struggle for Eco-Justice. Today's event will include an audience Q&A, so please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question. As well, if someone has typed a question you'd also like to know the answer to, please upvote that particular question by clicking the thumbs up button. So please support these authors and pals by purchasing a copy of this book from us. A link to buy The Disabled Hiker's Guide to Western Washington and Oregon will be shared in the chat a couple of times during the event, along with links to Naomi's books as well. Syren and Naomi, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, really excited to be here. I'm Syren Nagakyrie. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a white non-binary person with shoulder-length brown hair, and behind me is two posters featuring artwork from the Disabled Hiker's Guide to Western Washington and Oregon. Thank you, Naomi, for being here with me tonight. I'm really excited to just hang out and have a conversation with you.
It's such a privilege. Hello, everyone. Naomi Ortiz. I am a light-skinned mestiza with artwork and books behind me. I have short brown hair, some rockin' lipstick, and hoop earrings, and I'm happy to be here to celebrate this guide coming into the world. Yay! So first, before we dive into learning more about the guide, tell me a little bit about Disabled Hikers.
Yeah,
what is
so
it?
yeah, I started Disabled Hikers in March of 2018. Of course, after a lifetime of feeling excluded from outdoor spaces and outdoor recreation. But, nature was always really important to me. I'd spent a lot of time as a kid just sitting in my yard and watching the clouds and the birds and the bugs and just kind of hanging out. And, that really gave me a space I felt to, feel like I belonged where, the rest of the world was really telling me I didn't belong there. But when I was just sitting outside and hanging out outdoors, that felt really good and felt like I belonged somewhere. So, as I grew older, I really wanted to kind of figure out how can I have more of these experiences? How can I, feel like I have more of the sense of belonging in place? So I eventually found out that hiking is a thing that people do. So I, started just researching trails and trying to figure out what it was that my body could do in the outdoor space and what hiking looked like for me. And really quickly realized that, there was lots of barriers and obstacles that I was going to have to figure out to be able to engage in this activity. And, every time I would approach someone to ask questions or try to look for resources and information, I just kept hitting brick wall after brick wall, and really no one understood what it was I was asking or what I needed. So it was really just this process of just figuring out on my own. And, and then I enrolled in a couple of like education programs to learn about, wildcrafting and plant medicine and herbal medicine. And that really, I felt like really kind of opened up this world to me of, oh, I can have these really like slow, meaningful, intent experiences with plants. And that just kind of shifted my perspective from, everything has to be this like really intense hiking experience to, oh, I can just go out and find a patch of, a patch of plants and hang out. And that can be a perfectly meaningful and valid way to experience the outdoors. So, all of that just kind of, I felt like really, in retrospect, really kind of created the framework for how I approach, my experiences in the outdoors. And then, once I moved up to the Olympic Peninsula in 2017, I really, this place is just so incredible. It's all old growth rainforest and rocky coastlines and mountain peaks. And I was really excited to experience this new land to me. And, I started researching trails and, started out on a hike and, immediately just encountered all these, really difficult barriers that weren't listed in any of the guides that I read anywhere. So, there was like steep drop-offs and rocky areas and steep stairs and all the stuff that wasn't listed. So, I wound up at this waterfall and just was exhausted and in pain and frustrated from having to have this experience yet again. And immediately just in that moment, like inspiration struck. And I said, I'm going to do something about this. And I went home and wrote up about my experience on a blog and wrote a little trail guide and created the spoon rating system and started sharing more of these experiences. And Disabled Hikers was kind of born from there.
And folks are participating in Disabled Hikers, right? Like it's now its own nonprofit and beyond like one person doing it.
Yeah, it has really grown over the last few years. We have a really active social media community. A lot of people who are really a community that is really forming. For me, it was also an opportunity to find other disabled folks who were interested in the outdoors and wanted to have these experiences. And suddenly there was all these other people who were saying, yes, I'm also disabled. I also love being outdoors, but I don't know how, or there isn't information available to me. I didn't know there was anyone else who wanted to do this because I don't see them anywhere. Mm-hmm. So, it was really this opportunity for a community to start building and coming together. And that's been really amazing.
I don't know if you've had this experience, but I find a lot of times when I talk about wanting to go out and experience nature in my own terms. So I use a mobility scooter, especially if I have to walk really more than a little bit. And so that's going to be what I'm using out in wild or natural spaces. So anytime folks hear me talking about wanting to engage and be out in nature and develop my relationship with nature, which is a really important part for me as a writer to have that to brace against, is they oftentimes say, oh, well, there's a special program for that, or, oh, you need to find adaptive recreation, blah, 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 to like be able to do that. And sort of this assumption of like automatic segregation that I can only participate if I'm, being helped by non-disabled people who have figured it all out for me. And that's not really how I like to, it could be fun, I'm sure, and not to diss on like adaptive recreation programs, and it's like, I want to go out and do my own thing. And I want to be able to, access and engage with nature in my own way and have my own relationship with it. So how have people responded in terms of like disabled hikers being this thing that's not segregated? It's not this like special adaptive thing. Do people get that?
Yeah, I think it's really meaningful that we are entirely disabled led, and all of our group hikes are, you know, we we call them affinity spaces. I have mixed feelings about that term, but
Mm.
it's always for by and for people who have some experience of disability or chronic illness, neurodivergent, and of course, they are, folks who come to the group hikes are welcome to bring their friends and family and supporters, but it is absolutely a space by and for us. And that I feel like is really, really different, and it was certainly something different for me. And, just having that space to know that everyone who is there has, some similar lived experience to you and will have some kind of understanding about access from their own perspective, and to be able to figure that out together on your own terms, like you said, without having non-disabled people saying, oh, we're going to help you with this. No, I'm perfectly capable. We're perfectly capable of figuring it out on our own and developing these own spaces on our own terms. So, yeah.
hmm The first time I got connected with disabled hikers, actually, I was visiting Washington after presenting at a conference, and was desperately looking for information on accessible hikes because I naively thought like, oh, beach pull-offs, cool. You can like pull off and be able to like get to the beach. And I didn't realize that there was like really steep climbs to get down to the beach from a lot of the area, and stairs and different things. And so I was like looking on the national park sites, looking everywhere, and I could not find anything. And then I came across disabled hikers and found a little post that you had done on Rialto Beach. And it was the only beach experience I got in my entire trip.
Wow.
But like that lack of information is so huge, and just not being expected there. I was at Arches National Park earlier this year,
Mm.
and was actually on one of the hikes that was actually the most accessible trail, was the one that was marked as least accessible. Like actually all their wheelchair accessible trails, a lot of them were washed out, and there was like a step between the parking lot and the, and the actual trail. So anyway, much to write about, but but I was on this like, it was labeled like the super intense. I'm sure it did get super intense after a while, but the first part of it, at least a good quarter to half a mile, was really accessible. And I was out there on my little scooter, going along, just really soaking in these amazing sandstone, boulder, wall things that I was getting to just connect with and actually touch and be near. And I go around this corner and there's a hiker walking towards me, and they literally looked at me and were like, how did you get here? I was so taken aback. I was like, by wheel? I mean, I didn't know like what to say to that. So, just like this kind of affrontive thing that happens where we're not expected on trails, or we're not seen as hikers, as disabled people, even though we are. Of course we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what nature means to you.
Yeah, I feel like kind of the dominant conception of nature is this idea of this pristine, untouched environment. And of course, that is not true. That has really never existed. The wilderness has always been a place of interaction between human and more than human people. And it was only through, colonization that we started kind of setting aside these spaces as, oh, we're going to conserve this space as something pristine and perfect that only a few people can access, and everything else is not that. So we set up kind of this dichotomy between natural and unnatural, built and wild, and that binary really doesn't exist. For me, nature is the air that I breathe in. It's the sun on my skin. It's the blood in my veins. It's the tree that is outside my window. It's my dog. Nature is everything and everywhere. And I feel like as a disabled person, like really connecting with that and recognizing the ways that I can engage with nature in these manners that really kind of challenge that dominant narrative is both really meaningful to me, and also I feel like can really start dismantling those perceptions that really have, to put it lightly, done a lot of harm in the world.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot about nature as, and I think this is what you're talking about too, is like interdependent spaces,
Mhm.
places where, mutual aid is happening, where people are in, plants and animals are witnessing each other, dirt, soil. And I love your point about how it can be at like your kitchen table, or it could be out in the middle of nowhere. Like all of
Mhm.
that is nature, which I think is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's this action of reciprocity, that is so present in nature. And anytime we engage in that action of reciprocity and connection, we are engaging with nature. And that
Mm.
is really underpins all of our lives and existence. None of us exist independently of anyone or anything else.
Right. Which is disabled people we know intimately.
Mhm.
We don't survive without it.
Yep.
So let's dive into the guidebook. Tell me a little bit about what brought you to writing the guidebook, and why disability. I think we've covered this a little bit. Why it's important to be in the outdoors, but yeah, tell me about what brought you to write this guidebook.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been, as a child, I was a voracious reader, and I've always been a writer. I wrote my first little book when I was probably in like the third grade or something like that. So I always knew I wanted to write. This is not the book that I ever imagined I was going to write, but it is the book that got written. So, I think it really kind of came about in a really interesting way. I was starting to write these trail guides and posting them online, and some media attention was growing around disabled hikers and around that work. And a feature article was written about it in Outside Online magazine, and someone from Falcon Guides saw that article and I had mentioned in there, oh, I'd love to write a book one day, just kind of offhandedly. And Falcon Guides reached out and said, yes, we would love to work with you on that. And I said, okay, let's do that. So yeah, it just kind of happened really quickly and really suddenly. I contracted for it in January of 2020. And then of course, pandemic happened and wildfires happened and all of that happened. And a lot of personal instability in my life too, which really had a very deep impact on the book and on myself in a lot of ways. But I started just doing a lot of research and really diving into the kind of information that existed or didn't exist, and figuring out what it was that would serve as many people as possible in the format that a guidebook can offer. I totally recognize that we can say we're trying to make something accessible to everyone, but that is like a really difficult thing to achieve, because access needs can conflict so much, and everyone has so many different things that they need to be able to engage in a space, and it's very individualized. So trying to provide that information in a way that is both clear and succinct and meaningful is definitely a challenge. So yeah, and then kind
So
of lost my train of thought there. So
yeah, break down a little bit like how things are laid out in the book. Like what kind of information will somebody actually get to learn from the guidebook?
Yeah, so it starts out with the spoon rating system, which is a kind of an accessibility difficulty kind of rating system that I created.
I don't
Um,
know if everybody might be familiar with what spoons are. We
oh
like
yeah.
it's definitely like a disability community thing. Do you want to explain where that comes from, or what that means?
Yeah, so it comes from spoon theory, which is created by Christine Mezzorando. I always mispronounce her name, but roughly that. And it's a metaphor for the energy rationing that a lot of disabled and chronically ill folks have to do, and the kind of reduced amount of energy that you may have available in a day. So, for example, I may start with 10 spoons in a day, and every activity that I have to do deducts a certain number of spoons. So, getting dressed, getting showered and getting dressed and making breakfast, that's 2 spoons every morning. And, going to work, that's like 5 spoons every day, and coming home and taking care of the dog, that's another spoon.
The story also that I think I remember reading was like they were sitting in a diner and they were trying to explain energy and like their like really having defined limits of energy to their friend, and so grabbed spoons off other tables and was like, all right, if I take a car versus the bus, that's like 2 spoons. If I take the bus instead of a car, that's going to be like 4 spoons out of like my 6 spoons for the day or whatever. And so display community has really adopted that as like a way to really kind of try to explain defined limits to the non-disabled world, where like a lot of times people push off, well, they of course have capacity too, but push past it, pretending that they don't. But you know, for non-disabled folks, a lot of times the consequences aren't as intense for disabled people. So it's a way for us to explain like defined limits.
Yeah. And I feel like it has, for me, it's one of those cultural things that, we've kind of, the community has kind of like bonded around, and like we have this shared understanding through this metaphor that I feel is really meaningful.
And it's totally taken on its like life of its own and like language of its own. People identify
Spoonie life.
Yes, like different things. So tell me about how you use this as a tool to explain the energy you'd exert in a trail.
Yeah, so I kind of broke that down into a 1 to 5 spoon system, which is it's kind of an arbitrary number, but we had to give it some kind of number for meaning. So it starts with a 1 spoon hike would be what a non-disabled person may consider like the most easy hike. But I have tried to really be very clear and objective about what this means. So many difficulty ratings are really kind of just arbitrary and have no defined meaning. It's just easy, medium, or hard, and that doesn't really mean anything to me. So for example, a 1 spoon hike would be something that's like less than 2 miles, a paved surface, no obstacles or barriers, lots of benches, places to sit, easy to navigate, that kind of thing. They're typically wheelchair accessible. So, but I have considered wheelchair accessibility kind of within the realm of difficulty because, wheelchair users are different. Everyone has different types of equipment, different types of needs, different experience levels and ability levels and all of that. So considering that, whether it's, something that would be accessible for someone who's, for example, uses adapted equipment versus someone who's using a manual wheelchair, and taking that into consideration within the difficulty rating. So then it, kind of goes all the way up to a 5 spoon, which would be, something that is longer. So like 5+ miles, has several steep grades up to like 20%, which is pretty steep. Long, elevation changes like up to a mile or 1,000 feet, something like that. So, but like any one of these factors within the spoon rating can change and not necessarily affect the overall rating, because there's so much, like I mentioned before, so much variety in the types of access needs that people have and the things that they need to consider in a trail. So really, it's just one like small piece of the information that is provided. So it kind of gives you a rough starting point when you're trying to look for a hike, but it's just one piece of that. So it's really important to consider all of the other information in there.
So touch on some of the other information that is in there besides the spoon rating.
Yeah, so it starts with, things like the length of the trail, the maximum grade of the trail, which is the steepness of a trail surface. So, for reference, like a typical wheelchair ramp can't exceed about an 8% grade. So if you think about that in comparison to a trail, so, a 15% grade would be roughly twice as steep as a typical wheelchair ramp. So it includes that for the maximum grade on a trail. And I've really tried to narrow it down to, as much as like 5 feet, because like one really steep section, even if it's only like 5 feet long, that can render a trail inaccessible for someone. Whereas, in a lot of guides, these grade ratings are kind of considered over like a long length of trail. So I've
Mm,
really tried to narrow it down like to every 5 feet. Um,
mhm,
and then there's, detailed directions and information about the parking lot and, whether it's paved, how many van accessible spots there are, how you're going to get to the trailhead from the parking lot, how you're going to get there. Are you going to have to like navigate this like bumpy, winding forest road? Or are you driving 2-lane highways the whole way there? Things like that. And then being really clear about like the types of amenities, whether there's flush toilets and trash cans, where the benches are, if there are any benches, if there's any water
mhm.
availability, things like that.
Something that I really liked too was you include a lot of photos in the book, which was helpful for me because somebody can say, like, my version of Sandy, which would make it inaccessible for me to use my scooter on versus somebody else's, understanding of what that means. It can really vary. So it was cool to see some of the pictures of things because I was like, oh, that would totally be doable. Or, oh, it was just cool to see also like accessibility features that you highlighted through your photos too, like a ramp up into like a gazebo or something, like being like, oh, that looks beautiful. I can imagine myself sitting there and like chilling out and, and having a beautiful time. So that was really helpful too, because you provide information in like lots of ways, visual ways. You give really detailed information on like even the surface, whether it's like paved or gravel or sand or things like that, which is things nobody thinks about, but actually really matters a lot in terms of how much energy or effort it's going to take to navigate something like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we all process information in different ways. So providing that in as many different formats as possible is really important.
So important. And the other thing I think is so cool about this guidebook is that you included like scenic um, viewpoints and stuff instead of, because
Mhm.
those never get included in guidebooks. But that's honestly a lot of how I get to experience national parks, for example, is like pulling off the side of the road. And so for me, like I mentioned, I was at Arches. There's a ton of scenic, viewpoints where you can get off, but in Canyonlands, for example, which we also tried to go to, there was like almost none. And so we
Mhm.
didn't get to stop, and I actually didn't get to see very much because I couldn't pull off the side of the road to take that time to just look around. So including like scenic viewpoints is just such a cool inclusion to me. I
Yeah.
really I love that.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I want to go on okay, we talked about like how I wanted to go on a hike, how I would use this book. I was talking about that a little bit with the pictures and the different information in there. So tell me a little bit about how you prepare for a hike. Do you do any rituals?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the kind of hike I'm doing and my intention for the hike. Now that I kind of like do this as my work, it has definitely shifted the way I engage with hiking. Sometimes in some really challenging ways. There's this saying like do what you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life, and that is just like not true. No, I it really yeah, when I'm going out for a hike to assess it or to write a trail guide, that's a very different experience than when I'm going out to have my own like enjoyable time outdoors. So when I'm going out to assess a hike, I start with doing lots of research and figuring out what information is out there, what I can expect. And of course, I mean that applies to when I'm going out for a personal hike too. But it's really about like assessing what information already exists and where the deficits are, and what I may need to really pay attention to make sure it gets covered in writing a trail guide. And then, I'm there's very much like this ritual process of like preparing my pack to go out for these hikes. I've got like my camera and my measuring equipment and my medical bag and all my water and all of these things that I need to be able to go out and do this work with me. And I'm very carefully packing my bag and trying to be it's important to me to be very intentful and meaningful about that process, because this is it just adds to the meaningful. I'm losing my train of thought there, but it's important to me to really engage in that process. And and then I'm recording the directions to the hike, and really from the moment I leave my house to the moment I end that hike, it's just this process of really being in a like really analytical mindset and just analyzing this hike from start to finish so that I can record all the information necessary. Versus when I'm going out on a hike for myself, of course, I still have to do all that informational research. I'm still like packing all of my medical equipment, my water and my snacks and my gear and all of that. But it's for me, it's kind of that I'm going out into the space to really kind of like, for me, it's like visiting my friends, right? Like I'm going to like see these trees that I love, and maybe my favorite waterfall or something like that, and just like kind of checking in and saying hi. How's everyone doing today? And and just like really connecting with the space in a meaningful way, and that really helps feed my work.
Hmm. Yeah, so I primarily, as write about self-care for people doing social justice work. And I did a bunch of interviews with social justice activists all over the country in preparing to write the book and researching the book. And one of the things I thought was really interesting was the way people talked about connecting to nature. They may or may not identify that as like a key component of their self-care. Um, but a lot of people mentioned it. And for me, it was something that I has always been part of what I identify as part of self-care, primarily because it's outside of people. I mean, it's like something that exists that I'm not necessarily reliant, on like having a good conversation with somebody, or counting on somebody to like be able to listen, which is great when it happens, but it's also not always the case. And so nature is something that I can go to brace against that's outside of human or kind of traditional support systems that we think about.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, a lot of times when I'm going to prepare for a hike, I mean, first of all, I live in the desert. I am coming to you from the current and ancestral lands of the Atham and the current settlement of the Pasquayaqui tribe in Tucson, Arizona. So it's the Sonoran Desert out here. So very much preparing water is the first thing that I do. Making sure I have enough water and a little extra in case, just in case. And then another thing that I've really come to start doing is thinking about, what I can offer back to the land to be in relationship with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you were mentioning earlier, it's this reciprocal relationship. And so I want to be able to give something back too. And I can't necessarily, all right.
Okay. Someone feels strongly about that.
They're saying, yes, give back. And so, being able to go out and offer some water to the land, or even use my scooter to like run over some invasive weeds and try to mush them down. Like, it's like these little things that we can do to witness and see the land around us that is reciprocal to me too, like as I'm also seeking support. And as change is happening, as things are changing quite fast in the environment that we live in.
Yeah, that's I feel like definitely, I mean, there's so many things to say about that, but I think when it comes to experiences of disability in the outdoors and seeing the effects of climate change, and like I said, like these are my friends, and going out and noticing the effects that climate change has on their bodies, and then noticing the effects that climate change has on my body, and that is also a reciprocal relationship. And struggling with that is definitely a challenge, as someone who really leans into nature, as a place of self-care and belonging.
Yeah. So you mentioned with disabled hikers that you all do some hikes together. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, how that happens, how people could get involved?
Yeah, so we do a lot of group hikes. Of course, COVID has shifted that, and we've scaled that back some. But we are hoping to kind of gear those up again. And of course, we always engage in accessibility includes COVID precautions. So we're very much masks are required for anyone and everyone who can wear them, et cetera, et cetera. But so they really start with again, like having that really good information about the trail and what people can expect on these outings, and providing that accessibility information up front, and also providing a way for people to opt into sharing their access needs, both privately and with the group. So, when people register, they have an opportunity to, email me directly and share any access needs that they, want me to be aware of. And then, when we gather as a group, there's an opportunity during the check-in process for everyone to kind of share about themselves and where they're at, both, physically and in their bodies, and share any access needs with the group that they want the group to be aware of, so that we can, kind of start developing that shared understanding, and just having that experience of, understanding what everyone needs to feel safe and comfortable in that space, and to engage in a way that feels good and comfortable for them. And then, the group hikes are really very much a collaborative experience. So it's not about me going out there and saying, okay, we're going to hike these 5 miles today, and we're going to do this and that and this, and we're going to get there. And that's not what the experience is about at all. It's very much about, checking in with each other, and just, figuring out what we need, and, enjoying the experience that we can have in the way that we can have it. And, there's lots of opportunities for people to take a break if they need to adjust their pace, whether slower or faster or whatever they need. And, just continually check in with each other throughout the process.
Tools like you're creating with this book are incredibly invaluable. And I just want to go back. I mean, so people can get involved in like doing hikes with disabled hikers. They can contribute to the website. They can participate in a community of disabled hikers. And I think that's incredible, because one of the things I hear a lot about, touching back on climate change, is people really want, I'll say environmental activists really want people to care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As I want people to care.
Yeah. Yeah.
To care about the land, the places we live. But what I think is so interesting is when we set up these hierarchies of who is seen as somebody who can care for the land, who can engage with the land, who can explore the land, and people, who can't, ex-disabled folks and other folks too, I think get lumped in with that.
Yeah.
Then we're blocking off a huge chunk of the population to develop a relationship with this place that we want people to love and protect.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you love something that you don't have a relationship with?
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely difficult. And so tools like this are incredibly invaluable to make that connection to relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like in the environmental and conservation movement, there's definitely this like kind of, top down, like you have to care about this. And if you don't care about it, then you're morally insufficient. And, but how are we getting people out there to be able to care about this? So, and then of course, disabled folks, BIPOC folks, multiply marginalized folks are the most impacted by climate change and environmental justice issues. But then we are at the same time seen as the least likely to care, the least likely to be out there, the least likely to want to engage in this space and develop a relationship with place. And that is certainly not my experience at all. I am very much, interested in being out there and developing these relationships, and care very much about environmental justice and conservation issues. So, yeah, so, I mean, I don't think you have to be someone who is, super interested in like getting out there and having outdoor experiences to necessarily care about the environment and climate change. There's lots of ways to
Of course.
develop that meaning, but it is definitely a very important way, and is something that has definitely been cut off from a lot of people who are very invested in these issues.
Yeah, and I think what both of us are saying is like that doesn't even have to be outside of like the street in front of our house. I mean, nature exists there, right? So it's
Right.
like if somebody has a relationship with a tree that grows near their house, or for me, there's like washes, which are like dry rivers that go through my neighborhood. And so all kinds of interesting and amazing plants grow there. So I love just checking it out. So, I mean, these are relationships, right? And like having that kind of relationship is something that is okay for us to have. And not only okay, it supports us in all these different kinds of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, disability is a totally natural experience. It is a natural and normal way to be embodied in the world. We see it both in humans and animals and plants, and and with climate change, the environment is, can be argued is increasingly becoming disabled. So how are we, as disabled folks, how are we reflecting that? How are we engaged in that? How is the movement then going to engage with us as people who have very intimate experiences of disablement in the environment?
Yes. One of the things you do, kind of as you, Syren, as ambassador of Disabled Hikers, founder, director, is some of that advocacy with, outdoor, I don't know, entities, brands. I'm not sure what to what to call them.
Stakeholders.
Yes. So do you want to like share anything about that? I don't know if any stories pop to mind or anything.
Yeah, it has definitely been an interesting experience. And I feel like there is a shift. I think a lot more people are becoming interested in engaging with disabled communities in this space. Right now it's largely under the banner of DEI, which I have very.
Can you explain what that is, what that stands for?
Yes, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Great.
Yeah. Which is kind
the
of
hot thing right now. It's
the hot thing. Are you doing DEI? Yeah. Yeah, and it has kind of become, I feel like, this just kind of this banner that people fly and say, oh, we're doing DEI, and that's kind of the end of it, So yeah, but I work with a lot of parks and organizations. I've had some really good experiences with some of the national parks, for example, connecting with them and pointing out some access issues that could be very easily and simply changed, and then having those changes made, which is always wonderful and amazing. And then, working with other organizations to develop more of these resources. For example, I did a project with Save the Redwoods League in Northern California about creating an access guide for the parks there. Yeah, so there is more of this work is starting to get traction, and I'm really excited about that.
That's really cool. And I think you're also working towards bringing visibility, like just having disabled people appear in ads, like in, brand type things, right?
Yeah. For so long, when disability is represented, which is very rarely, it still fits this very narrow definition of disability. So it's the super crip, the crippled guy who is like climbing the mountain and doing this
all
really,
buff.
all buff, like super fit, doing this really incredible thing that really isn't even realistic for the vast majority of non-disabled people.
Not unless you're carrying me up there, yeah.
Yeah, so that's and that narrative really has really done a lot of harm to the community and perceptions of disability in the outdoors. So challenging that is really important to me and disabled hikers work. So just, working with brands to give really authentic, accurate representation of disabled folks in the outdoors, which may be sitting on a city park bench. It may be, taking my wheelchair out onto a short paved path. It may be going for a long hike. I mean, there's all kinds of things, so, I always say it is important who we represent in the outdoor space, but also how. And that is left out often.
Yeah. So we have a couple of questions from folks. But before we got to that, I just wanted to make sure it was clear. So can you tell me where the areas that the guide covers?
Oh yeah, so it's Western Washington and Western Oregon. So essentially it's, if you're familiar with the area, it's like the Cascade Range to the coast, or in both Washington and Oregon. So it covers, the Cascade, the west side of the Cascades, I-5 corridor, the coast, and hikes throughout that region.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so for our first question, I feel so official. Question for Syren from Mel. Hello, Mel. What are some things people who hike and climb a lot without mobility obstacles do to advocate for your organization? That's a good question.
Yeah.
What's the wish list? Are you ready, Mel?
Yeah, I think, for one, pointing out to people that you're hiking and climbing with, when they are, saying ableist things, when you are encountering spaces that would be inaccessible to disabled folks, pointing that out and saying, oh, this might not be accessible to someone, and what can we do to change that? When you're planning events and things like that, recognize that, not everyone has a disability that, they may not be this image of disability that you have in your mind, that there are lots of disabled folks with a variety of disabilities that may or may not be visible at any point in time. So in any group that you're in, there is very likely someone who has some kind of disability in that group. So, just recognizing that there is not necessarily disabled and not disabled, and never the two shall meet, that it's much more complex and nuanced than that. So yeah, and then, inviting disabled folks into these spaces in a way that is safe and give them an opportunity to share their experiences and their knowledge and, build more awareness within these spaces is really important. And then, with disabled hikers specifically, we're always looking for money. So, running fundraisers, we have a couple of folks who have created a fundraiser. They're doing like a hiking challenge this year. So they have committed to fundraising for disabled hikers through that hiking challenge. And that's a really good way for allies to kind of give back.
That's amazing. If I can add two things just from my own experience.
Yeah.
I would also say just really inhabiting flexibility in the how everything goes from beginning to end, just being flexible, and asking folks if they need assistance versus assuming. Yeah. So I can't tell you the number of times people grab me and touch me without my consent, especially in spaces where it's like, whoa, you're here. So. All right, so from Suzanne, we have, what are your favorite wheelchair accessible hikes in the Portland metro area?
Yeah, so I have a few. There's in the guidebook, there's the Bristlecone Pine Trail at Hoyt Arboretum, which is really nice. It kind of leads to this nice picnic area with some ginkgos. There's Smith and Bybee Wetlands. There's a fairly wheelchair accessible trail at the Sandy River Delta, the Confluence Trail. And then, there's blanking on some others, but there's more listed both on the Disabled Hikers website. And if you're familiar with Access Recreation, they're based in Portland. They have probably over 30 trails in the Portland metro region listed that are wheelchair accessible too.
And there's plenty in the book too.
Yes.
Check it out. Great. And so from Debbie, we have, Bethany. Um, when and how can we look for upcoming events with disabled hiking community?
Yeah, so connecting with us on social media, we're on at Disabled Hikers on Instagram and Facebook. Signing up to the website, you can sign up with your email or sign up for the newsletter, and we always blast out events that way. We also have a Facebook group for folks to connect, so even if you're not in this region right now, there's ways to connect with folks there. And we are actually working on expanding, and we'll be developing a Disabled Hikers Network and a Disabled Hikers Leadership Development Program to both, connect disabled folks from around the country who are interested in the outdoors and want to find other people and just network and share information, and also to develop more leadership of disabled folks in the outdoor space so that they can do more of this work in their own communities.
I'm really excited about the network, especially as somebody who does not live in that area, just to connect to some other folks and maybe arrange, because you're imagining or envisioning that people would be like arranging hikes and connections and gatherings for disabled folks to go together on different trails, correct? Like that would be part of it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we have from Debbie, please share your available California hiking resources. Any plans to expand to New Mexico? A great place to hike.
So the next guidebook will actually be the Disabled Hiker's Guide to Northern California. I'll be working on that over the next year. Publication is scheduled for, I think, summer of 2024. As I work on that process, there will be more Northern California resources that I'll be able to put out as I'm really spending a lot of more time in that area. The Redwoods Guide is linked on our website and the Save the Redwoods League. There's also a organization, Access Northern California, who has some guides for wheelchair accessible spaces in Northern California as well. As far as, like I said, with expanding, we'll be doing that through the network and the leadership development program. So I'm really excited. There's so much interest from folks. I probably get at least half a dozen emails and messages a week from people who really want to, find more community and expand this work into their areas. So, yeah.
I think too, for all of us who don't live in that area but want resources, more information, sharing information about this guide with like our visitor centers, or being like, hey, do you know about this? Isn't this very cool way to like lay out information? Help us, like disabled folks want to, have this information. So like in New Mexico or Arizona or any state, any place, that's something that maybe we can do is to help amp, like, hey, it's happening. This is like the kind of information we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hope it can be an example, for community to say, this is the information that we need. This is what we want to exist. And everyone needs information to be able to access the outdoors, not just disabled folks. So, I really hope that this will, help shift perspectives about the kind of information that we all provide for these trails. So.
I think a lot about elders with that, I think a lot of times elders have a hard time knowing when or if to claim disability, and it's a little scary. But then also, confronting challenges of like limited mobility or dizziness, or, things that might affect how they engage with hiking or going out outside. Have you done any sort of connections with like elder communities in terms of bringing this kind of information to folks?
No, not specifically.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's something that people might get just excited about when they come across it, and then disabled hikers. So it sounds like you're doing a lot in terms of future projects. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on to let people know? Like, I mean, so much. Northern California is coming.
Yep. Northern California is coming. And then the next one, apparently I'm already thinking about a next one because I don't know.
'Cause we need it.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see. I'm thinking it'll either maybe be something like Montana or the Rockies or heading back over. I grew up in the Southeast, so heading back over there and doing some work in like North Carolina in that area.
Mm. Oh, wherever you end up, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Whatever information we have. Syren, I'm so honored to be able to talk with you today. We're a few minutes out. I don't know if you had anything else that you would like to share that we didn't touch on.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, folks are, like I mentioned, welcome to connect with us through social media and the website. Yeah, there's lots of community out there that has been, really meaningful for me to connect with, to just feel like, when I started this work, I thought I was the only one, and I am not the only one, and you're not the only one either. So, come
Yes.
find community.
Yes. And all these tools, that we can use to support ourselves and just our day-to-day life. I mean, this is just an invaluable tool.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I'm just noticing Powell said that they sold out of available copies through their website of the guide, and they do have more on the way. So
Awesome.
yes.
Yay.
So I'm actually gonna turn this back over to Nick to close us out.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Naomi. Thank you. And thank you so much, Syren, for joining us today. It was great to have you both there. Yeah. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's exciting that we did sell out of all, even this one here that's right beside me, we sold out all of these. So that's good. That's fantastic. We will be ordering, it won't take us long. We'll order lots in soon. So just check back on that and to order through there. So anyway, such a fantastic talk from both of you today, and so we so enjoyed having you both with us, and yeah, we hope to see you sometime in the store or in the rounds again. So and thank you all for everyone for tuning in today. It was wonderful to have you with us. So all right, have an excellent day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.